Welcome, everyone. Let's give another 30 seconds, half a minute to let the other participants to join. So again, welcome to our webinar about participants' guides to preventing and managing contaminants in organic waste recycling. We are very excited to have you here to join us in this webinar to celebrate World Soil Day. And today we have Jane Gilbert and also Marco Ricci with us in this webinar to present their work. Before we start, I would like to give a short introduction of ISWA. So what you're attending now is one of the ISWA webinars, and we organize this webinar from time to time on different topics. So you might be the first time for you to hear about ISWA. No worries, I'm here to give a short introduction. So ISWA is a network organization with a wide range of members from different parts of the world. And our mission is to promote and develop sustainable and professional waste management worldwide and transition to a circular economy. ISWA represents all aspects and stakeholders within the waste management sector, the public, the private, and academic. And so far, we have more than 1,300 members in 109 countries. So it's quite a unique, wide global network. Within ISWA, we have different working groups. So for example, biological treatment of waste is one of the working groups. It's also the working group that's hosting the webinar now. So Jane is our chair of the working group and Marco is our vice chair. Besides that, we also have other working groups working on different topics, climate change, collection, transportation, and etc. We also have our own publications, for example, the World Waste Management World, as well as Waste Management Research. We also have other technical publications as well. So if you would like to know more about ISWA, please feel free to contact me. I will leave my contact in the chat. So having said this, I'm going to hand over to Jane, who's going to present in this webinar.
Okay, good afternoon or good morning, everybody, and greetings from a not very sunny UK, despite my background here. I'm here in the UK, and Marco is going to join us from Italy. So I'm going to share my screen now and hope the tech works. Okay, can you see that, Sharon?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, grand. Okay, that's great. Okay, so in terms of our working group, there's myself who is the chair and Marco who is the vice chair. And as of summer this year, we have 87 active members that regularly contribute to the work that we do. So in terms of our purpose, our working group, in line with every other working group at ISWA, also has a purpose and objectives. And our purpose really is to act as a principal resource to ISWA in the field of biological waste treatment. And we deal with all types of biological waste treatment, from aerobic composting to anaerobic digestion. And it's particularly important, the resource to ISWA at the moment, given that ISWA is actually hosting the resources stand at the Conference of the Parties in Abu Dhabi at the moment. So we've been providing them with lots of information. And our objectives really from our working group are to compile and share information and to conduct and share knowledge of research and development activities. So hence the reason we're here today to provide some of that input. In terms of the work that we're going to present today, it really builds on the work that we did on our soils project, of which I'm sure most of you are aware. And it's one of the issues that has always been lingering in the background that we're aware of has been the issue of contamination. And we can't really advocate putting compost and anaerobic digestate onto soils if they're going to be heavily contaminated or contaminated anyhow. So our working group decided that the next piece of work that we would be doing after this soils work would be to develop a practitioner's guide for managing and preventing contaminants in organic waste recycling. And just to say that all 4 of these publications are free to download on the ISWA website at the URL based here. So what I'm going to do now is just talk you through some of the background and the rationale to the publication. There should be a question and answers box available to you. So if you do want to ask any questions, we will be stopping at various intervals to answer them. So please do that, and Siren will send them across to us. So here's a front cover of the practitioner's guide, and the background for it is really the aims of it are to provide information about different types of contaminants, the ways in which they can enter organic wastes and cause problems, and the ways in which they can be prevented and or removed. And I'm sure there's a lot of people here today who know an awful lot about contaminants and contamination, but when we come into dealing with policymakers and waste planners and non-specialists, then we assume that they understand some of these aspects, but that's not always the case. So what we wanted to do is pull this together, actually setting out some of the background and the reasons why managing contaminants is important. And once again, a copy of this as a PDF can be downloaded from the ISWA website. So one of the first things that we ended up having to really look at was, well, what was going to be the different definition of a contaminant? Because we've got lots of different words that are used in different parts of the world for different types of contaminants. Sometimes it's impurities, sometimes they're contraries, and we didn't really have a defined way of describing these items. So one of the first things we did was try to streamline and think, well, what are we actually talking about here? Because that's also going to be important for contractual issues as well. So it's really an undesirable item, chemical substance or biological material in organic waste or its recycled products that either affect the recycling process or the recycled end product, so either in compost or anaerobic digestion. And we do, we feel that that sort of is as encompassing as we possibly can be without being too restrictive. But hopefully this definition will actually help people communicate, help our members communicate what contaminants mean. We know that contaminants as well can reduce profitability at plants, reducing product quality, potentially harming people and the environment, and of course damaging equipment as well. And it's a mutually reinforcing circle where, one impact in one area will affect all the others as well. So we split the different types of contaminants up functionally into 3 different categories, depending upon the way in which they will hopefully be managed. And the first being physical, and we're more than aware of the problems there with physical contaminants, especially plastic film, that really does seem to be the major problem. Chemical contaminants as well, and we've all been aware of the issue with PFAS, the perfluorinated alkyl substances, these forever chemicals that seem to be penetrating everywhere in the world, and also biological contaminants. And We've also spoken quite a lot in recent years about pathogens, bacterial, fungal, viral pathogens, and also weed seeds as well that can cause problems, principally to the end users of the compost, whether that be people and or plants. So we've tried to list these contaminants functionally, although we do recognise that there's a spectrum between them, and there's quite a considerable overlap. So looking first at physical contaminants, in the report we've gone into these in much more detail, talking about the different types of plastics that are going to be available, and in particular plastic film. And here's an example of some allegedly source separated food waste, but with about 10% contamination in it. So you can see there's an awful lot of polyethylene bags there as well. Metals can be problematic, especially with regards to equipment, glass and stones as well, that can be very difficult to get out at the back end, and are particular issues for anaerobic digestion because they can start filling the tanks up and reducing operating volumes in the tanks. So we've described all of these. We've then described some of the chemical contaminants and tried as far as we can to just cover the whole spectrum. Pesticide residues have always been problematic, and I'm sure many of you are aware of the problems with clopyralid in the USA about 20 years ago, and the problems that those long-lived pesticides can actually have and can go through the composting and digestion processes. Persistent organic pollutants, of which pesticides are just some of them, but they're much wider ranging as well, and now really including the PFAS, these polyfluoroalkyl substances, which are termed forever chemicals because they just will not break down and have been shown to be toxic to animals and humans. Issues about heavy metals, dioxins and furans, we got that twice, apologies, and microplastics as well, which once again is another evolving issue that's now really starting to come to the fore. But once again, these are present everywhere, but of course we're needing to be careful about their presence in recycled organic products as well. And finally, the biological contaminants, pathogens, E. coli, salmonella, the helminth, parasites, the parasitic eggs as well. And these have been very comprehensively addressed over the years with regards to sewage sludge composting or biosolids composting, especially in the USA. But increasingly, we've had issues and concerns coming about plant toxins. So, for example, some of the toxins that are present in yew and some other compounds that plants produce to keep predators off them, but can also be transferred through as well. So we've included some of that in there as well, tried to update it with the best information that we have. And we're lucky that the UK in particular had done quite a lot of risk assessment work on this. So I've pointed people to some of the reports where they can look into that in more detail. Weeds and weed seeds, of course, are an issue, especially if you're going to want to sell compost and digest stage, but we know the proper time temperature profiles should be adequate. So it's all about processing. But invasive species as well. I mean, this photograph on the right-hand side that I found on the internet shows problems with Japanese knotweed in the UK. We recognise that invasive species will obviously be very different in different parts of the world, but with the impacts of climate change as well, invasive species is now becoming more of a problem. So once again, time temperature profiles there are very, very important. Insect and pest management, and also issues about genetically modified organisms or genetically engineered plant material, biological material. So we've dealt with all of these, and on the whole, biological contaminants with proper time temperature profiles really are not an issue. The key thing is making sure that the processes are well managed. And one of the things that came out of all of this, when we've talked about the contaminants and we know what potentially can be in there. So how do we prevent it? How do we manage it? And one thing as well that seemed to be missing was, well, how should it be managed? And we know that a lot of our members, a lot of the ISWA members, have difficulty communicating some of these aspects to their clients, especially when it comes to municipalities, local authorities, councils, and that really the most preferred option is prevention. We prevent contaminants getting into the organic waste stream in the first place is far preferable to trying to remove them. But where they are there, then we really thought hard about this in terms of, well, what should be the hierarchy? Should we try to remove some of these contaminants before treatment, during treatment, or after treatment? And ideally, it is better to remove them before treatment, because you then, for example, one plastic bag, if you can get that plastic bag out in one full piece, it's a lot easier than trying to get out 100 or 1,000 tiny fragments after it has been through the process. However, we will talk a little bit about some of the challenges of doing that. And we are aware that organic waste, because they're very high in water, means that some of these contaminants are actually quite difficult to remove up during the before treatment process, especially where we're dealing with food waste, because water is a polar molecule and it has the capacity to bind to itself. It's cohesive, but it's also adhesive as well, which means that it helps the food waste stick to bits of plastic, as you're all aware. And removing these up front can actually be quite difficult, time consuming, certainly costly, and you run the risk as well of fragmenting some of those plastics and making them smaller right up at prior to treatment. So we're aware of that, and we've tried to include that within this part here. And it's really, the lesser of the evils, trying to remove some of these up front rather than further down the process when the moisture levels are potentially a lot lower and there's an awful lot less water there to cause the stickiness to adhere to these contaminants. So anyhow, we've provided a hierarchy, and once again, we hope that will be helpful to our members when you're communicating the issue of contaminants with your clients and so forth. So I'm going to stop now and hand over to Marco, who is in Italy in a monastery celebrating World Soil Day. So I'm going to pass over to him now, and he's going to carry on. But in the meantime, do we have any questions from anybody? Sharon, have we had any questions come through or not?
No, on the chat, I don't see any questions. Oh yeah, there's
okay.
one.
Well, I think we've
Henrik.
From Henrik. Hi, Henrik. Yes, potentially, but we are talking. Sorry, just for everybody else, your comment was about pyrolysis and biochar removal can be part of a treatment, removal after treatment. Yes, of course it can, but what we're dealing with here is biological treatment. So yes, of course, if that's the way that the organic materials are going to be managed, yes, of course, but I would still be careful about emissions relating emissions to air in particular caused by some of these substances. So, but yeah, good to hear from you anyhow. So I'm going to hand over to Marco now, and I'll join you in a little bit.
Okay, thank you, Jane. Good afternoon. First of all, hope you can hear me. Just give me a sign. Okay. Well, as said, I'm broadcasting from northern Italy, from the monastery of Astino. And monasteries have been for centuries places where I would say sustainable soil management has been studied and investigated for agricultural purposes. If you can share the slides, because I can see you, I can't see the slides shared. That would be important for me. Okay, let's go further on with what are the contents of the practitioner's guidance document. So one chapter is focusing on prevention, because when writing the documents, we became aware that one key message to share with decision makers is that besides technicalities which can be applied in organic recycling facilities, so industrial composting and biogas facilities, we need to prevent contaminants to be delivered with feedstock into those facilities. And so the prevention starts from separate collection schemes. So it is important to decide how to sort organic waste, and especially kitchen waste or food waste. It is important that large producers of organic waste, which are households or families, are equipped with specific collection tools, and we gave a short focus of what kind of tools are available to make source separation at home convenient and user-friendly. And we devoted some insight into public awareness initiatives, which are a fundamental factor to make waste generators, so people, us, aware about the importance to let's say, deliver clean feedstock to industrial facilities. All this kind of information have been also referenced so that readers can go into more detail about specific actions or tools or schemes if they wish to. And again, many of the, let's say, best practice we referring to in our practitioner's guide have a global perspective. So you can find experiences coming from North America up to European countries. Let's go to the next step or slide, please. Regarding a relevant part of the practitioner's guide is devoted also to removal techniques, which can be applied in compost and anaerobic digestion facilities. And in that case, we gave an overview focusing on different types of techniques which are generally applied. And you can see them in the rows of this table. And in the columns, you see where these techniques can be applied, starting from feedstock like green waste, food waste, or packaged food waste, but also focusing on the product, so on compost and digestate, which very often need to be refined. So contaminants need to be removed in order to get a quality product out of this recycling process. And as you can see, there are a number of techniques which can be applied, and we deliberately didn't go into the details of this technique, but in the next slide, please, we have also focused on specific case studies to show at which steps of our recycling process these techniques can be applied. So we show you in this case a few examples from real working facilities. And the first example is a composting facility whose main input food stock are let's say, food waste from households and from the HoReCa sector. So HoReCa are large generators like hotel, restaurants, and canteens. And as we will see in a moment, the facility is a very basic facility. If we go to the next step, please, where food waste comes in, and it undergoes a first separation technique by means of a screw separator, which is able to sort out bags and especially films, plastic films, which are, according to the experience, one of the largest contaminants to be found in organic waste recycling. And then this pre-treated food waste is mixed with a bulking material, which is normally shredded garden and park waste or wood, and it undergoes composting. After the composting step, the fresh compost is undergoing a further refinement by means, in this case, of a screen and wind sifter. And this again allows us to sort out on one side overseas, which can be recirculated for the next batch, and on the other side, plastics and other contaminants like glass and metals. And the fine fraction is becoming compost and is used in agriculture. Interesting for the readers, we think, is the fact that we also provided some key data to understand what is the efficiency that removal techniques can be achieved both during pre-treatment or, let's say, after the composting step. And so you have some reference numbers that may be useful for other situations. If we go to a next slide, we also showed examples of another facility. The first one, which I just showed, was from Italy. This dry anaerobic digestion and composting facilities is located in Sweden. So in that case, the type of organic waste managed is mainly similar. It's bio-waste and food waste also from the commercial sector and from the supermarket sector. And in that case, the facility combines anaerobic digestion, so the production of biogas out of organic waste, with a post-composting step of the solid residues which originate from biogas production, which is digestate. As you can see from the flow chart, the facility is more complex, and it applies basically pre-treatment of the incoming feedstock to sort out light contaminant fractions, again plastics, but also bulk contaminants and metal scraps. And afterwards, it applies a dry anaerobic digestion. And after that step, the digestate, as told you, is first, let's say, dewatered. So a screw press is eliminating the water, the liquid digestate, which is going to further applications. And the solid digestate is mixed with a bulking agent, and it's transformed into compost. And again, after the composting step, we have a further refinement by means of a double star screen and wind sifter, and both techniques are applied to sort plastic contaminants, so the fine fractions which have passed through the organic treatment steps, to get them out from the final compost, which is sieved off. Again, for these facilities and for the others which we put into the appendix, you will find some reference key numbers which show you again the effectiveness of the removal during pre and after composting. In all cases quoted, I think the lesson learned is that refinement and treatment techniques are unable to sort out 100% of their contaminants. And that's why it's so important to start from a feedstock which is as clean as possible. So prevention is the need in our sector. Let's go to the next slide, please. So, and the other thing which came out is that for sure we need further research and development of methods and techniques to increase the efficiencies of removing unwanted contaminants from organic waste. Current techniques are able to achieve up to 98% of contaminants of removal, but which means that a small fraction still is able to end up into the compost, into the digestates. And so we need to prevent these kind of effect as much as possible to prevent these kind of contaminants to end up and to build up in our soils. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so ISVA's mission, as said, is to promote the transition to circular economy. And for our working group, we look extremely well on the quality of organic waste recycling. This means that we want this document also for a call of commitment and action for various players which are part of the circular economy of organic waste recycling. And these are manufacturers, companies and hauliers involved in municipal solid waste collection, managers of composting and anaerobic digestion facilities, and last but not least, decision makers and city managers, because cities are places where large amounts of organic waste arise daily and where the journey of organic waste starts to become compost and digestate and end up back to the soils which gave origins to them. And going briefly into the details of our call for action in the next slide, we see that ISWER in our working group urges equipment manufacturers to invest in research to ameliorate and identify new techniques to minimize contaminants loss, to minimize contaminants, and besides minimizing the loss of organic matter due to the dragging effect. The dragging effect is one of the things that happens when you recycle organic waste, and we want to minimize them because organic matter and waste is a precious feedstock for producing compost and digestate. We also call on managers on composting NAD facilities to prioritize maximizing the quality of the final products, so compost and digestate, but besides ensuring that when they sign contract with waste producers, well, these contracts should include clauses that set a maximum allowed contamination level, which means dirty feedstock can't be let in, or cleaner feedstock should have more convenient and more or less intensive gate fees for accepting these materials. Of course, when talking about contaminants in feedstock, in input material, our thought goes to municipal decision makers and companies collecting organic waste separately. So we need these kind of actors to be engaged in inspecting routinely the quality of the feedstock and acting proactively once there are areas where feedstock contamination becomes critical. And so last but not least, we're getting back, as I told you before, to cities and decision makers, which need to commit and invest in regular information activities aimed to raise citizens' awareness about the importance of maximizing the quality when they're sorting their organic waste at home. Next slide, please. And yes, here we're coming somehow to an end of the overview of the content of the ISWER Practitioner's Guide, and we are open for a set of questions if you have made them during the chat. Thank you very much again for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Marco. We have two questions. One is from Alka. She's asking, do you also have experience with optical removal techniques to get off plastics from compost?
Good question. There are a number of tests ongoing. The difficulty in the composting sector is the high water content, which means that optical sorting can be applied only at the end of the process when we get a drier material. It's very difficult to apply it at the beginning of the process because the risk of eliminating large amounts of organics together with the sorted contaminant would be high. It's the so-called dragging effect with both Jane and me mentioned when illustrating the content of the document. So for the time being, it is very difficult. It might be possible in the future to do refining, especially on the oversieves before getting the final compost.
Thank you. Another question is from Mark. He's asking, are there case studies for any prevention initiatives through traceability?
If by traceability you mean identifying the single waste producers, yes, there is. There are a number of collection schemes now ongoing in Europe and especially in the country where I'm broadcasting from, in Italy, where we are able to identify the bins and to identify the waste producers, so the family associated to single bins, or let's say buildings associated to single bins. So in that case, we are able to feed back to households if their quality doesn't comply. It's the so-called carrot and stick initiative. You deliver households with the right equipments to make source separation of organic waste as convenient as possible, but at the same time, you need feedback mechanisms. In the worst case, also stopping to collect contaminated organic waste at specific locations. There are a number of experiences which show that these initiatives are effective in screwing down significantly the amounts of contaminants and so rising the quality. And I think we have provided in this guidance document also a few reference documents and which you can go on to read.
Thanks, Marco. I don't know whether Jane, you have any addition to add?
You're muted, Jane.
There's always one, isn't there? No, not directly to what you've just said, Marco. I think Elka's, hi Elka, has just asked about do we have instructions for routine inspection of bio-waste? I know that the Italian compost and anaerobic digestion organization, CHEEK, that Marco is attending their event today. You came up with some criteria for inspecting bio-waste once it has been delivered to a site in terms of the percentage of contaminants, visual contaminants in that. And what we have suggested is that sort of be widely adopted by operators, but that there is an agreed protocol in place with municipalities and councils who are feeding the feedstocks into the facility. I don't know, Marco, if you want to say more about the work you've done there with CHEEK.
Yes, actually, we published a guidance document, a national one, where we both suggest how to perform routine inspections of bio-waste, so how to do the analysis, and also including what we call visual analysis. At the same time, we suggested and we recommended a minimum number of inspections according to the size of the municipality, but also on the size of the recycling facility. Actually, Italy is in Europe among the countries where our organization, the Italian Composting and Biogas Organization, is running something like 1,000 and more composition analysis on bio-waste yearly. And this allows us really to check the quality in a number of municipalities. And of course, this result is a feedback for the municipalities to know if they have to engage to ameliorate the quality or if the quality is satisfactory. So there is a national guidance which has been provided by us and written together with relevant stakeholders, including the Italian EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. Yeah. So it's not something coming from just one organization. It was a teamwork with relevant stakeholders joined around the table.
And I think the UK, the Association for Organics Recycling, did a similar piece of work based on, I think, yours and CHEEK's work, Marco. So there is something there in English as well.
Yes.
We could try and put something up, I think, on the ISWA website or something to point to it.
For sure. And other composting organizations in Europe, I remember the German colleagues have recently also published one or two methodologies. I would say all composting organizations I know about and aware about worldwide are all committed to produce a quality product, a compost. And all agree on the fact that analyzing quality and having methodologies to check the quality of feedstock, because these wastes are feedstocks for producing organic fertilizers and soil improvers which get back to our soils. So there are a number of documents available, and I guess the English ones are probably the easiest ones to circulate because it's a common language.
Okay, we'll see how we can do that then. Oh, Jenny's excellent.
Oh, thanks, Jenny.
You've done
Great.
that. Brilliant. Okay.
For the others, for those who are listening, we are commenting that Jenny Grant has posted it on the chat of these webinars. So feel free to copy and paste it into your browser.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks, Jenny. That's helpful. Okay, if we don't have any more questions at the moment, I'll go on back to share and
Just to
just to
answer,
conclude.
if you're looking, Eve, Elke, for a quick methodology, there is a quick methodology published this year by the German BGK. They have the expensive one, which is the sorting analysis, and a quick one, which, well, I won't spend today time on describing that, but it's a very easy one. It can be handled by one person in half an hour, and it has been designed to have a preliminary assessment to make an evaluation, like deciding if to accept or not a specific delivery at the gate. So that may be of help for you.
Okay, perhaps we can try and find the source of that as well. Yeah. Okay, thanks, Marco. So just really to conclude, the report is out. We only had a very small number printed up for the ISWA Congress in Muscat in Oman about a month ago, and they've all gone. There was only a very, very limited print run just because it was hugely expensive to get the documents printed in the Middle East. But we will be trying to get some new documents printed in time for EFAT next year in Munich, and the plans are as well to have it translated into Spanish for the Ecomondo in Mexico next year. But in the meantime, the QR code is there for which should take you directly to the report. And it goes without saying that we've had huge amount of input as well from some of our active working group members who would just really like to just say thank you to, including Alberto Confalonari. I always get Alberto's name wrong. Confalonari.
It's a difficult name. It's Confalonieri. It doesn't matter.
I always get it wrong, and I do apologise, Alberto, please. Who is Marco's colleague at Cheek, from Percy Foster in Ireland, Foster Environmental, from Matthias Hartel, from Fachverband Biogas, which is the German Biogas Association, from Lucas here, from Hitachi Zosen, who's provided us with a lot of information about the flow charts going through in the in the annexes, and Hitachi, Zosen, and Innova have also sponsored the initial print run that we had done as well. So thanks to them formally. Also thanks to Hania Jalalipur, who is based at the University in Rostock, Jennifer MacDonald at New York City Department of Sanitation over in the USA, and Christian Mullicky, who is now with Compost Systems in Spain, but was in Uruguay at the time. And all of these people have kindly provided us with information, advice, and met with us as well, and suffered Marco and I's pestering emails as well. So the report wouldn't be anything as good as it is without these people. So a huge thank you there to them. And I think that's it from us too, unless there are any more questions. So I'd just like to say thank you again. The URL there is at the bottom if you want to try and download it. And yeah, keep in touch. And if you're not a member of our working group, please do think about joining. So I'll hand over now to Marco and then back to Jiren to formally close.
I think you have said everything, but the last message was the most important one. Thanks to the contributors, and if you wish to become a contributor for our next studies, the people participating today are really warmly welcome to join ISWA if they haven't done so already, and the working group if they have an expertise on organic waste treatment and recycling. As said, the more contributors we have and the more worldwide they are, the more global the perspective becomes that we include in what we prepare and what we share.
Okay, just looking in the chats as well, I can see that Stephanie has kindly sent us the link to the BGK methodology. Thanks, Stephanie.
Great.
Jenny has also said that they've got some more resources on their on the REA's website. So once again, thanks for that, Jenny. And I think Fabio Masatomono Onofuji has asked if there's any study guides for composting sewage sludge, treatment plant sludge. Not so much in Europe, Fabio, but if you look at the US EPA website, they call it biosolids over in the USA,
Yeah.
and there's an awful lot of information there on biosolids composting in the USA. So have a look at the US EPA website for that. So perhaps we hand back over to Jiren to
Yes.
conclude.
Thank you very much, Jane and Marcel. It's a very informative and fruitful webinar. I can see there's a great engagement from our audience, a lot of sharing. So thank you so much for joining again. Let's keep in touch. I left my contact in the chat. So if you have any questions regarding the webinar, also you would like to know more about ISWA, please get in touch. So thank you again for joining.
Okay, thanks guys.
Thank you, and
Bye.
have a nice afternoon or morning wherever you are. Bye.